Hi everyone, and welcome to this week's EBC video. We're right down here at St. John's this week, thinking about John 3 verses 13 through 17. We're here because we're going to be using this cross a little bit to be thinking about those verses. And in case you hadn't noticed it when I first said it, yes, these verses have that most beloved, probably most famous verse in the Bible, right? John 3:16, for God so loved the world that he gave his only son so that whoever believed in him may not perish but have eternal life. And we've heard that a lot, and after a while maybe we think we know all that's in that verse, but I really want to unpack it a little bit with the verses that are immediately before it and immediately after it, right? So before it, Jesus is talking about the fact that the Son of Man must be lifted up, just as Moses lifted up the serpent in the wilderness so that whoever would believe in him would have eternal life. And if you don't know, this story of Moses in the wilderness lifting up a serpent actually involves a place that's in Numbers 21, and Moses is in the wilderness with everyone, and they've actually had some recent success against the Canaanites. But then, for whatever reason, the Israelites start to grumble about how bad the food is and how tough the conditions are, and they start grumbling against God and against Moses. And in Numbers, God sends snakes, fiery serpents, it says, in amongst the people to bite them, and a lot of Israelites are killed. So now the Israelites catch on, and they go back to Moses, and they say, Moses, can you take away the snakes? Moses goes to God, and God says to Moses, instead of taking away the snakes, he says, make a bronze serpent and then hold that serpent up. And whoever looks at the serpent, if they've been bitten, they won't actually die from the serpent bite. So I've got my little demonstration here, right? It's not a bronze serpent, but if you can imagine for a moment, back in the day, Moses being instructed to sort of lift up this serpent on a pole so that people would look at it. And that's all it took, is just look at it, and they'll be saved. Now, there's a lot more to this story, and I'd love to go into it. This serpent actually winds up being destroyed in 2 Kings, when the people have actually turned it into more of an idol and less of just a demonstration of God's power. But that's the connection that Jesus is creating when he talks about the Son of Man being lifted up, right? And we have it here. This cross comes into church almost every week with someone carrying it in, lifting it up so that we can all see it. And I know, by the way, that when we're all here in church, sometimes what happens is, that's just something that happens and we're all busy singing the hymn at the same time. But you know what? There's something important about the fact that we're carrying in that cross lifted up so that we can all see it and turn our attention to Jesus. And that's all it takes. It isn't about having to do something else. It isn't about having to earn something else. It's simply about getting our focus onto the cross that winds up with God giving us eternal life at that point. And then the other thing I want to focus on is the verse right after John 3:16. In John 3:17, the verse goes on to make very clear that Jesus was not sent into the world to condemn the world, but to save the world through Jesus. And that's important too, because if you'll notice the story of Moses, what happens is the people have done bad things. God sends that condemnation to him in the form of those snakes, and then God saves them. When Jesus comes, there's no longer that step of God saying, I'm going to destroy you. It's simply the love of Jesus comes to save us. If we focus on the cross, that's the salvation that we have, simply because God has now sent his loving Son to us. All right, so everyone, as you go about your week this week, you can have a lot of comfort in the fact that there's not going to be that condemnation step involved anymore. What's going to happen is, as long as you have an opportunity to focus on the cross, Jesus is there to save you. Everyone, have a great week.